Who's there?
One can certainly raise the objection. A Ouija board is produced in a factory, made on an assembly line with thousands of others. What on earth is the issue with this, and why would this be such a dangerous tool? The reason why is because it is a doorway, that you are reaching out and giving permission to whatever is out there swimming by, so to speak, to come and interact with you. And that is forming a relationship with that entity.
Hello and welcome to Forward Boldly. That clip that you just heard is from the hit podcast, The Exorcist Files. They're actually case files taken from the Exorcist Father Carlos Martin's actual cases that he's had to deal with. It's been wildly popular, approximately 1 million downloads since its launch in January, and I myself cannot recommend it highly enough. It's riveting. It's gripping. I actually discovered it recently, so I sort of binge listened to episode after episode. They're great dramatizations of these actual cases of possession, but at the same time, they're sprinkled with very solid catechesis, really great lessons to introduce people to the basics of the Catholic faith, the sacraments, the power of confession, the relics, the saints, all of that. And that exorcist, who is one of the producers of this great series, is Father Carlos Martins, and I am honored to welcome him onto my show today. Hello, Father Martins. Great to have you here.
Thank you. Hello, Christine. Well, glad to be here.
So let's talk about this series, Exorcist Files. First of all, congratulations on its great success. And first, how did you get involved in doing it? What was the idea behind this? How did you get involved in this?
Sure. Yeah. So it was back just before COVID occurred. It was 2019. The Holy See asked me to undertake a catechesis on the demonic, on spiritual warfare, possession, and exorcism. And they asked me to undertake it because essentially of two reasons. One, the number of exorcism cases are just going up. So the repaganization of Western society is causing people to get into trouble spiritually, and they need the ministry of the church to remedy that. Secondly, there is a lot of information that is being disseminated through social media, some of them by clergy, Catholic clergy, and it's just wrong information. The principles are wrong, and sometimes they're tied up with content of private revelation and stuff that really is not helpful. Well-intentioned, but not helpful. So they wanted something. They wanted people to be given meat and to be given the correct sort of principles by which then they can discern how to make choices in their lives. So that's the task I was given.
And they're fascinating. These cases are fascinating. Let's actually go back a little bit into your own ministry. I know you spoke a little bit about your background on the show. You actually were an atheist. Then you converted to the Catholic faith through the Holy Eucharist. Amazing story. And then, is it correct to say you got pretty quickly into exorcism, the ministry of exorcism, or did that take a while?
No, it was pretty quick. So when I was ordained a deacon, I was assigned to a parish, and that parish housed the exorcists for the archdiocese that I was in, and they were so busy with actual cases of possession and severe obsession, oppression, that anything lesser that would come in, for example, a house infestation or some inanimate object that was causing something diabolical, In a moment of desperation, one of those priests, one of the exorcists, turned to me and just said, "Deacon, go get rid of the devil out of this house that someone has just called in about." So I had zero training. And you know what? I look back at that, and really, it was one of the greatest gifts that I had. Now, to be perfectly clear, I would never advise that someone go in and begin battling the demonic without training. The devil is cunning, but in so when you receive a training, you learn a model, you learn a style, and then you go into a situation with that model, with that style, and it helps you. It gives you tracks to run on. So it's a great help. But every model and every style has its limitations. And so I had to develop my own model. I had developed my own understanding of the situation. And so what I knew innately, and I can't remember somebody teaching me this. So I think it was just from God preparing me. I had an understanding that if the devil is in a location, in a person, in a place, he's there for a reason. He's been given the rights to be there. And so my job is to remove those rights. Once I've done that, then the devil has to leave. And so I went into this situation of this house, which it was a young woman. She was living in her uncle's house temporarily because her house had burned down in a fire. And so he was deployed overseas, was going to be away for 2 years. His house was empty. And he said, "Look, my house is yours. So live in there and be at peace. And I'm glad to be able to help you out." But what happened immediately, what she noticed, is that the house was infested. So there were objects that were sitting safely on a countertop, on a tabletop, would suddenly fall to the floor and smash. Images, pictures hanging on the wall, the same thing. There would be this sense of her being watched. And I think we've all experienced that at some time or other, where you're in a room and you just feel an intense set of eyes that are observing you, that are watching you. And she would feel this to such a degree that she would be a nervous wreck. And this woman was a person who, when I could tell by speaking with her, she was not given to imagination, to imaginative kind of realities. She was not an emotional person. She was a professional, very clear-headed, very educated, very rational, a very matter-of-fact person. But the thing that creeped her out the most was that her uncle had in his room, in his bedroom, a music box that would chime at random times. And this happened, by the time she called me, she was in the home about 8 months. And no one was winding this music box. It had a wind-up key in the side. In fact, she had removed that key. So there was no way that this thing was being wound, and yet it was chiming. And it was doing so in a mocking way. There would be some days where she would think, my gosh, maybe it stopped. I haven't heard that music box now all day. And just when that thought would come in, it would start chiming. So there was this kind of cat and mouse thing that was happening. And it was driving her up the wall. So she came and she asked, would you come and bless the home? And sure, I'll bless your house. So I got there and I walked into the house. And the first thing I noticed was, as I did so, the ceiling fan started to spin. And it spun very, very slowly. And then all of a sudden, it spun so quickly, far more quickly than what it was ever designed to do. It was spinning as quickly as the prop engine on a plane, such that anything in the room that wasn't tied down was now blowing around and was scattered about. And then all of a sudden, it stopped. on a dime, instantly. No wind down. It just instantly stopped. And then it did the same thing, but backwards this time.
Wow.
So I thought, okay, well, it's clear the devil's here. He doesn't want me to be here. But anyway, it's time for him to leave. This woman was practicing her faith. I have no idea about her uncle. I have no idea where he was at, but it really doesn't matter. He had given his niece authority to live in his home. And he had said, my house is your house. So that gave her all the legal authority to get what was in that house out, or at least to stop harassing her. And so what I did was I made holy water, and we have a ritual for an exorcism of a place. And I prayed that. So I made the holy water on the kitchen counter, prayed that ritual, which takes about 7 minutes or so to go through. And then I started, the conclusion of that ritual is to bless every space with that holy water. And so I did the entire first floor. And as I was doing that rite of exorcism, by the way, the music box starts chiming. And so it's chiming now as I'm going through the house, through the first floor, hitting every corner, every object, every window, every door with holy water as a way to, that holy water where it is sprinkled, it's a symbolic reclaiming of the space for God. And that's exactly what the prayer, both for the holy water and the exorcism, the culmination of which is the sprinkling of holy water, prescribed. That's what they say. That's what the declaration is contained within them, that the demons cede the place to God, and that people who live there can live in peace. So I get to the second floor. I bless all of that until I get to the uncle's bedroom, which I left for last. I enter in and I put down the holy water, and I picked up the music box. Now, when I did so, she gasped because she was never able to physically pick the thing up. It was as if it was screwed down on top of the dresser. But I picked it up, no problem. As I did so, as I touched it, the chiming stopped. And then there was this one of the weirdest moments of any house blessing I've ever done. I opened up this box and there were no parts inside it. There were no chimes. There were no chiming mechanisms. There wasn't even anything that was there at one time. It was a completely empty wooden box. I could see the hole in the side where the key would go in, but the key itself was connected to nothing. So I closed the box. I hit it with holy water. I left the house, and she never had a problem in the dwelling again.
Wow. And you were a deacon at the time?
At that time, I can't remember. Yes, on that occasion, yes, I was a deacon.
Wow.
I was a deacon on that occasion.
So do you think what would have allowed the enemy to infiltrate the house and stay in the house like that?
I don't know. I don't know what her uncle was into. I don't know what his relationship with God was, if he had any. I don't know what kind of moral life he was in, what kind of spiritual state he was in. But evil certainly had the right to live in the home. And, one has to imagine, why would you allow your niece to dwell in there if there is this presence? So he didn't know, is what I would wager, that he had this in his house. In other words, the demons were leaving him alone because he was doing their bidding. And so they don't want to change a dang thing.
Right.
So they're going to be extremely quiet. They're not going to make a sound. But the very presence of his niece, who was attending church, who had a relationship with God, was painful to them. Right. And so they wanted her out. And so they exercised their own plan for getting her to leave. Well, she didn't leave. And I'm glad she didn't leave. I'm glad she took a stand against the evil and was willing to stay there. that on her part, it took a lot of courage, because a lot of people would just have nothing to do with the place and they would just leave. But evil has to be confronted. You can't run away from it. The confrontation of evil is part of the identity of the Christian. We have to have the courage to do so, believing in the dignity that Christ has given us and the power that he's bestowed on us through our baptism. Now, in her case, she did the right thing. She came to the church, she asked for help, and the church granted that help. But then, she had to choose to continue to live in the house, and she did so tranquilly. So for her, it was the start of a new spiritual renewal in her own life, whereby she witnessed the power of God. And I remember she started attending our church, our parish, and became involved in many of our ministries.
Right. I hearing various stories of exorcisms and demonic, influence and things like that. I often find, I'm sure you do too, that God will use those trials and sufferings and difficulties to bring that soul or that family kind of back to the faith, or stronger in the faith than before.
Absolutely, he will. Yeah. And it's a test that he allows the person to go through. Now, I say test with a quotations around it. Our God is not cruel. He doesn't submit us to cruelty simply because he can, because he has the power to do so. But our faith itself, without testing, without facing its opposition, it itself doesn't grow. So we need that. So it's a test in the sense that it is allowing us to break through the glass ceiling, so to speak, and to come into a new place with that supernatural faith that he's given us. So it needs confrontation. And all of us need to be aware of that, because evil cannot be negotiated with. It has to be confronted.
Right. And I think a lot of viewers out there unfamiliar with the ministry of exorcism, they labor under this misimpression that every single exorcism case, whether it's infiltration of a house or a person, it's just sort of one and done, and it's over.
Right.
But you've encountered cases where it's gone on for a long time, and there's multiple sessions.
Oh, sure. And in fact, most cases involve multiple sessions. The average possession case, right, which is the highest form of demonic activity or of a demonic hold. The average possession case, both with myself and with my colleagues, the other exorcists I know, lasts about a year and a half. And that's with receiving an exorcism every week. So let's say 75 exorcisms. So why does it take so long? Well, because grace isn't cheap. And if it were to be easy, like God forgives our sins instantaneously when we go to confession and ask for that forgiveness. So he dispenses a removal of the guilt of the sin. And he wants to do that immediately upon our confessing of them sacramentally. But with regard to exorcism, it involves a choice that is aberrant. It involves an aberration that has given jurisdiction to Satan, and Satan exercises that jurisdiction. And so if God were to make that too cheap, then people would never resolve to get rid of evil out of their lives. Well, I'll just make a pact with the devil here. I'll curse someone there. I'll engage in an act of fornication with a prostitute, or I'll live out a life, a clandestine life as a consumer of internet pornography with impunity. And so if it's just as easy as going in front of a priest and receiving his blessing, or he pronounces some magical words out of a book and poof, the devil is gone, then the sacrifice of his son, of God the Father's Son, is cheapened by that.
Right.
So when people get the devil, they get possessed most often through the committing of one of two actions. One is the dabbling in the occult. So these are not by any means the only way that one can get the devil, but these are the two most common. So a dabbling in the occult. So the visiting of a fortune teller, the engaging in trying to curse somebody, necromancy, calling forth the dead, seances, and so forth, visiting a medium, that kind of thing, use of a Ouija board. That is by far the most common. And why? Because in doing that action, you are violating the first commandment. And how are you doing so? The commandment that identifies God as the sole deity in our lives. Well, it violates it because it's a replication of the demonic rage, the demonic rebellion that Satan and his fallen angels made against God. God constructed the universe with certain predetermined limits. We are limited in our knowledge. We are limited in our power. And so to engage in the occult is an attempt to usurp those limits. Right? When we visit a fortune teller, we're trying to gain knowledge into that realm that only God knows. Even the demons don't know the future. They can give a pretty good guess at things because of their superior intellect, but they don't know the future. But when we are tricked into thinking that we can know the future and try to do so through an engagement with the occult, then we are replicating that demonic rebellion. And so in that action, we have made a declaration, I will not serve you, God. I am God. And so that action gives rights. It gives a jurisdiction to the demons to possess. In fact, they can do so through the committing of any mortal sin, right? Any mortal sin gives the demons the right to possess. Why? Well, if you die in the state of mortal sin, you will never see heaven. Right? So they've already gained you for eternity in that state, right? Until you reconcile with the Lord, you belong to them. The second sin, the second most common sin by which people obtain demons, by which demons cling to people, is through an aberrant use of the sexual faculty, some kind of sexual perversion, use of pornography, the visiting of a prostitute, adultery, the misuse of our faculty. And why is this the case? Well, because the sexual faculty is the way by which we most come to resemble God. And in fact, the way in which we aid him in the creation of new persons. All right, so it takes three to create a human being. Right? The man and the woman, the husband and the wife, they provide the biological matter. And when that matter is just right, God infuses a soul. So there are three involved in creating, and in fact, that relationship with God is the moment where a human being is most dignified in his activity or her activity on the part of the woman. We most resemble God when we beget new life into the world. So that makes that activity the most beautiful thing a human being can do. And the devil, for that reason, is going to be all over that. He wants to mar it and make it ugly in any and every way that he can. And so that appetite, too, is a relentless appetite. At the fall, that became easily our most damaged appetite, our most unruly appetite. People will give up anything for sex. They'll give up food, they'll give up money, they'll give up their freedom. And so that aberrancy exercising its will on us, it causes many people to just give up and, well, I'm just going to commit the sin because I just can't stand this temptation anymore. I'm tired of fighting, kind of thing. Well, the tragedy with that is that becomes a gateway to the demonic, especially pornography. The Bible tells us, Scripture informs us that the sexual faculty, the use of the sexual faculty is the way by which we bond with someone, right? The two become one flesh, Genesis informs us. Christ identifies something even one step further, in that when someone lusts after another person, the physicality of the act doesn't need to be there for the act of adultery to already take place, right? He who lusts after a woman has already committed adultery in his heart. So that bond is there, even though the physical act has not been there. Paul identifies something even further, where he says, don't you know that those of you who go to the prostitute, you are bonding with the prostitute and becoming one with her, such that what is in her comes to you, and vice versa. So you have this, the act of sex, in other words, is a conduit by which you come to share the spiritual state of your partner. And that partner doesn't have to be a live partner. It can be a virtual partner. It can be a partner that is not participating in the act of lust at all, but is walking down the street, and then you in lusting after that person, that bond is already there. So you are at least opening yourself up to whatever the conduit that lust establishes, and forms a pathway by which that which is dysfunctional in terms of the demonic comes to you, right? So you have people, you have, for example, men, they go out of town on a business trip to Las Vegas. Prostitution is legal there. Right? They go and they hire a prostitute. Right? They pick up demons from that prostitute. They go home and they infect their wives. And this is the tragedy of being sexually unclean.
Right. And you mentioned
this is a pandemic that happens today. And it's a pandemic. And the internet pornography, because of that bond that's there, that's one of the reasons why it makes it so addictive. Because that image that the consumer is lusting after and has formed a bond with, everyone else who is also lusting after that image also forms a bond with it. So now you're part of this immense nexus whereby there's now a spiritual connection between the consumers. It is a gateway to the demonic.
You mentioned that we are most like God when we are participating in the act of creating new life through the physical intimacy. And of course, the demons can't create new life. And do you think is there a sense of envy from the demons?
There's every kind of vice you can imagine, but certainly the vice that I see most often exhibited by the demons is rage. There is an absolute rage against the human being that we effectively are evidently the cause of their downfall. So this doesn't appear anywhere in Revelation, at least not scriptural revelation. But there is a long-standing tradition in the Catholic Church, and it's a tradition that is there. It's present. It's a topic that comes up in many of the writings of many of the major theologians, and even in the schools, like the Franciscan school of theology, especially, but also the Dominican school and the Jesuit school. That the cause of Satan's rebellion was the revelation to Satan, which at that point he wasn't Satan. Satan means enemy. So he wasn't an enemy in that moment, but he became the enemy. But so Satan, in his pre-fallen state, it was revealed to him that Christ would incarnate himself as a human being. So that you have the eternal Son of God, the second person of the Trinity. He's going to take on a human nature in order to identify with human beings. Now, this is before the fall of Adam and Eve. So such that, in other words, part and parcel of this thinking is that even if Adam had not sinned, right? The sin was Adam's, it was not Eve's, right? The covenant was made with Adam. So the fall was Adam and Eve's, but the sin was the sin of Adam. when Eve ate the apple, I'm saying apple, when she ate the fruit, nothing happened, nothing changed. But when Adam ate it, all hell broke loose. So what you have is a theory that is very consistent in the Catholic tradition, that Christ's plan was for the incarnation to be even apart from sin, such that the love of Christ was going to be manifest in this way, and his dignity would be lent to human beings in order to even raise their dignity, which meant that the human being is the only being in reality created for its own sake, so that the angels, who are objectively higher beings in their nature, would be lesser beings because of Christ's choice to incarnate himself. Right? And that was just too much for Satan. There's no way I'm going to serve a creature less than me. There's just no way. And so that was, so this theory goes, which is again a very long-standing theory, a very and one that is a theory. It is a theory, and it is consistent, and it does explain the phenomena in such a way that it is consistent with the anger that I see. Animals don't have a hatred. Demons don't have an hatred of animals. They don't love them, but they don't hate them like they hate human beings. They're after humans. They're trying to possess humans. They're trying to drag humans down to hell. And this theory, if it is true, and I certainly think that it is worth considering, would account for one factual what do I want to say? Well, one fact, and that is that more women are possessed than men. And in my experience, it's a 3-to-1 ratio. And in every exorcist that I personally know, that ratio is pretty consistent. And some, I mean, it may even be more for some of them. I know that one, he said it was 5-to-1 or 6-to-1. The devil hates women more than he hates men. Why would that be the case? Well, using this theory to give us the principles, if the incarnation is the cause of Satan's downfall, then she by whom Christ became incarnate is going to be his arch enemy in the human realm. And so out of a rage to Our Lady, he preys on women more than he does on men.
Because of his special hatred for Mary.
Exactly. The particular hatred he has for her because of the cooperation that she gave God, the 100% cooperation in being the new Eve.
And I hear, just from various exorcists, that you do call upon Mary for help during exorcisms, and that her help is particularly powerful. Have you found that to be the case?
Absolutely. In fact, so my test to see if somebody is liberated is I have the person pray the Hail Mary, not the Our Father. Some demons will even swallow their pride enough to recite the Our Father. I have never encountered a demon who would be willing to utter the Hail Mary. Right? It is the thing that is going to flush out Satan. And in fact, when we need to end a session, sessions, it's up for God to determine when a devil leaves. I mean, all I can do is pray. I can do what the church asks me to do. I am there for the victim, and I am trying to liberate the victim with everything that I have in me. But it's ultimately up to God to decide if and when the demon leaves. God is the exorcist, and we priest exorcists, we're merely his agents. That's all we are. There are times when a session has gone on so long and you just have to end it. So in order to get but you can't send this victim out while he or she is demoning out. Well, there's a demon manifest, and just say, okay, well, I've got to go now. Well, hopefully you have a safe drive home.
Right.
So you need to have you need to put the demon into a rest state. You need to have him stop manifesting. And the way we do that is we sing a Marian hymn. In my experience, that works better than anything. If you ask the demon to do so, he's going to respond with an expletive. But if you invoke Mary, there's a response. There's a response. And, and Our Lady, throughout all of history, has had such a profound place in spiritual warfare. I'm thinking of, for example, in Bernadette Soubirous, the visionary at Lourdes, France, when during one of the apparitions, of course, the river Gave is next to the grotto, and as Bernadette is receiving one of the apparitions, she hears coming from the river these terrible demonic sounds and voices, two demons barking at her, ridiculing her, cussing her. And so this is as the Blessed Mother is appearing to her. And Bernadette reports that all the Blessed Mother did was turn her eyes in the slightest manner towards the general direction of the demon, and they screamed and departed. Right? So it's not anywhere near a fair fight.
Right.
It's just you have Mike Tyson coming up against a couple of first graders.
Right. Have you found in your own personal ministry that you feel you've grown closer to Our Lady, that you love her more through the ministry of exorcism?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. When you see that visceral hatred that the demons have, well, anybody that demons hate is my friend. Right. And there is something so profoundly beautiful in the Mother of God and in God's plan to have a creature cooperate with him in the salvation of the world. All right, because Christ is not a creature. His human nature is created, but his being is an eternal being. And so he never came to be. His human nature came to be, but he never did. But Our Lady is different. She did come to be, and God rested his entire plan for the salvation of the world upon the yes of this one creature. Now that takes a profound vulnerability. That takes a profound confidence and just a loveliness. There's a beauty to the whole thing, that when he invites this young lady, this young girl, who exteriorly there would be nothing to make her remarkable. I have no idea how beautiful Our Lady was in this life. She may have been the most beautiful woman in the world, for all I know, but we don't hear about that in the scriptures. So anything like that would be a conjecture. But there is nothing extraordinary about her mentioned in the scriptures. So for all intents and purposes, I think it's safe to see that we see her as exteriorly a very ordinary looking person, but interiorly she possessed everything God ever wanted in a person and never turned him down in any manner. Anything he wanted of her, she gave it to him fully and completely.
So beautiful. I wanted to turn for a moment to one of the interesting things that was brought out in the Exorcist Files, where there was a case where the person first went to his Protestant pastor for help, and the Protestant pastor acknowledged, I can't help you here, but you know what? I know a good exorcist. I thought that's very interesting that Protestant pastors will actually refer these cases to Catholic exorcists, knowing that the exorcists are better equipped to deal with the demonic. It's almost like, it makes me think, because I was a former Protestant, so I'm thinking, okay, well, if you believe that's the case, maybe go a little bit further and consider possibly that maybe the Catholic faith is true if it's, if we have priests who can command the demons, and have power of the demons, and the Protestants don't.
Right. Yeah. So, there was one case I had where there was a Lutheran minister who had contacted me, and one of the members of his congregation, she had picked up demons somehow, and he had prayed and prayed and prayed, and it seemingly had no effect. So he asked if he could send her to me, and I said, I have no problem with that, on the condition that you come as well. In other words, I wanted him to be there as I diagnosed, simply because as I make my assessment, and the hardest thing about exorcism is rendering a diagnosis. So it would be helpful to me if he's there, because he can comment yes, I saw this aspect of her. No, I didn't see this aspect of her. And so when the three of us met, I took down my whatever information I wanted after interviewing her, and whatever areas I wanted to pray into, I circle in red on those notes that I take. And then, I put on my alb, I put on my cincture, and I put on my stole. And I could see, just kind of in the look in his face, there was, inside his head, he was thinking, gosh, this is a little bit much. Do you really have to put on your regalia, so to speak? Is this just showing off? And as I was putting on the stole, or perhaps I was just even tying up the cincture at this point, the demon said, "Do you think any of that crap is going to help you?" But he didn't say crap. He said something worse. Mm-hmm. I said, "In the name of Jesus, demon, be silent." And he was. And so the Lutheran pastor said at that moment, I told him those exact words, and he would never listen to me. And here he is listening to you. 2 years later, we received him into the Catholic.
Oh, wow. Praise be Jesus Christ.
Yeah, amen. Now and forever.
I hope you're enjoying the show. The rest of the show is behind the paywall, so please go to churchmilitant.com to watch the rest. For those who are not premium subscribers, you can sign up at churchmilitant.com/go premium. See you there.